Well, good morning to you too, and thank you very much for taking time from your busy schedule and answer a few questions on behalf of our audience here at HDN Digest. What exactly does an engineer do? Go,
Yeah,
go
this is
ahead, Eve.
very, broad question, spelling the truth, because an engineer can be defined, in many different ways, right? Because we have literally, tens of different types or even 100 different types of engineers that can be. But in general, I would say an engineer is a someone who can actually solve problem. You find solutions to problem in general by using technology and science. And that's the generic, way I would describe, what an engineer does in general. But again, it depends on what type of engineers we have. But we have chemical engineering, electrical engineering, structural engineering, a, all types of different type, biological engineering, chemical, you name it, right? And within each of these different fields, you have, different types of engineer you can be, electrical engineer or electronics engineer, for example, or applied physics or whatever. So it depends. So it's a very broad category of, a field when we say engineer. So it really, begs, to define exactly what one, wants to do when they say, "Oh, I want to be an engineer."
And I'll expand on that one to say that being an engineer doesn't mean that you work purely as an engineer, that your title in your job is engineering. For 15 plus years, actually 20 plus years, I never held the engineering title, but my engineering degree ultimately helped me define and ideate and create new products and services with the help of other engineers in the market. So engineering is really the concept of leveraging your thoughts, your the ability to dissect large complex issues and try to solve them from a micro level, right? And then ultimately bring them back all together to ultimately solve the customer problem. So that's how you need to consider yourself as an engineer. It's not just being an electrical engineer, it's really how do you apply your logics and your thought process to solve complex problems in the market.
I would definitely agree with that because again, once you trying to solve problem logically in a methodological manner, and that's basically, and you trying to once you have a problem, you're trying to find solutions for it in general. It doesn't really matter what type of engineering you do, and you can apply these skills in any field. Basically, you don't have to be an engineer once you graduate as an engineer, for example.
Mhm.
And as you mentioned, Asselin, from the introduction, right? After I graduated, I went ahead and, be a physics teacher, for example, right? I did,
Okay.
even though I wasn't using my hands as an engineer, for example, right? Or my skills, my engineering skills per se, but I did use my, my skills or whatever I learned in school, how to introduce a lesson, for example, to kids, how to best, approach, a problem and for them to absorb, hey, what does it mean, to solve this problem and find solutions. Again, all those skills are soft skills. They're, kind of subtle, but those are things that you learn, in engineering. It's not just, oh, I'm going to learn how to fix a TV, for example. That's not,
Okay.
what engineering is
Wonderful.
how to a
Uh,
thought process.
Okay. Our co-host Jean Jonassaint has a question for you too.
Mhm.
Yes, my question is related to the way you define the work you are doing. So I would like to know if you can give us an example of a solution you brought to a problem. Maybe not too complex because we are talking with a broad audience, But for example, I know Lourdes work on 5G, and this is very bizarre for a lot of people who don't understand what it is exactly. But maybe there are some simple things, or you can explain this problem we are facing, we were facing, and what kind of solution we were able to bring to solve the problem.
In general, for I would say for 20 plus years, I work in product management, right? When you work in product management, the concept of working in product management is to identify the products and services that a company want to sell to their customers out there. But it's not just the products and services that they want to sell, but it's really what issues that the customers have that they are trying to solve, right? So I'll give you an example of such a thing, where engineering comes into the picture. Think of it, if you have a business where you are selling for your own business, where you are selling services across multiple locations. So think of a business, you have 3 or 4 different locations that you operate in throughout the US or throughout the world, 3 or 4 main locations. And you want to transfer data, information across those 3 or 4 locations. But you want your data to always stay private and secure. You don't want it to land on the internet, right? You don't want anybody to tap into that data on the internet. So how do you do that? So this is where the engineering skill comes in. How do you create a product that enables a company to keep that data secure and private, never touching the web, but at the same time, that data is going across multiple continents? How do you do something like that and make sure that the customer is satisfied and the customer pay for the service in a way that they consider to be valuable to them, because they cannot afford to pay millions of dollars for that service? So you have to design a solution that solves the customer's problem while at the same time solve it in an effective way and a price conscious way that benefits the customer and benefits the company that is designing the problem. So that's what I did as a product manager. So in that particular example, what I would do as a product manager / engineer is set up time, write down all of the key customer requirements, write down all of the key customer issues, write down all of the complexity associated with the solution that the customer needs, write down the complexity associated with the network of the service provider who is actually providing the service. And then from there, create an end-to-end product that solves this problem for them. And the end-to-end product may vary. It may be a VPN solution. It may be a private network solution. It may be many different ways that we can solve that one particular problem for them, right? But ultimately, it goes back to understanding the problem, understanding the limitations of the problem, understanding the complexity of what it takes to do it, and then taking it one step further, which is understanding at the end, after you've created and solved it, will the customer pay for it? Because if the customer is not willing to pay for it, then you shouldn't be doing it, because you're going to be operating at a loss, right? So all of that needs to come into the picture. When you think of an engineer, you need to think of all of these different aspects. Otherwise, all you are doing is research and development. Because research and development, you're not thinking of revenue, right? You're only thinking of researching and designing something. So hopefully this provides you a concept of how I operate and how I think as an engineer, even though I did not have the engineering title during that time.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, yeah.
Let me ask you.
And piggyback on that
do
note very quickly, right? From what Lourdes just described, for example, she's talked about data, right? So if from my line of work, at one point or another, I would have to consider, okay, how about, what kind of pipe, do we have to design, right, in the network, the telecommunication network, in order to carry that data, from one point to another. And that's one, kind of much simpler than, what Lourdes, has described. But again, there are many different things. You can actually have a 10-inch pipe, for example, right? To be generic, but that can cost $1 million. But it can also have, a 2-inch pipe, And it depends on the amount of data that you want to carry and how much, again, it would cost and what the customer is willing to pay for. And all that, again, you have to consider while, and it's not just designing stuff or bringing one solution to a problem, but you have to have other consideration, also financial, business, and all kind of stuff, right? And time, all this kind of stuff.
So we
All right,
can
let
see
me
that
ask
for an
you.
engineer, budgeting is very important.
I wouldn't say it's not just budgeting, right? That plays a role in it, but it's also understanding the problem that you're trying to solve and whether or not ultimately the solution that you provide will meet the needs, because there are different types of solutions for issues that customers are facing. Which one is the ideal solution? That may be very, very expensive, right? However, a less than ideal solution may meet the need, but there may be a little risk in terms of the quality of service that you are getting for that less ideal solution, but that can come in at a price point of, let's say, 20% of the ideal cost or price point that you would have offered it to the market to the customer. So those are all different ways that you need to look at it. It's not to say that you're not providing a solution, but what is the ideal solution to meet the particular customer needs at a price point that they can sustain?
And that goes across all type of engineering, by the way, right? Doesn't mean, it doesn't matter what type of engineer you are, you still have to make, all those considerations, right?